Thank you very much. It's a privilege and a pleasure to be able to participate in this very important event today. I'd like to begin with a procedural announcement. As people will have noticed from the cameras around, the events today are being webcast. If you are watching on the webcast, you already know about that. And if you were here in the room, that may not seem to matter. But not everyone who is here in the room will be able to stay with us for the entire day. If you have to leave and you want to connect to the webcast, or if you are connected to the webcast and some technological problem happens and you need to reconnect to the webcast, I want to remind everyone of how to find it. The URL for the webcast is tinyurl. That is tinyurl.com/linkinghands. That's tinyurl.com/linkinghands. And you will be able to watch the proceedings live at that URL throughout the day. It's now my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker this morning, who is a person who needs no introduction. It's always easy for the moderator when the person needs no introduction, but that's not my job, so I will introduce him anyway. Chief Wilton Littlechild is one of the commissioners of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. He's a member of the United Nations Expert Mechanism on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, the Honorary Chief for the Masquatchie, and International Chief for Treaty 6. Wilton Littlechild.
Thank you very much, and good morning to all of you. Gachtado. Tatamskadna onigan. Inanaskamuan stainista. Usamo tsoma. On behalf of my colleagues, Justice Murray Sinclair, our chairperson, and Dr. Marie Wilson, it's a tremendous honor for me to be here with you this morning, and also on behalf of all of our TRC staff. I want to begin by thanking, of course, the hosts and organizers and all the speakers and participants, especially you who are in front of me now and also through the webcast. Particularly, I also want to acknowledge the survivors here this morning. In living a Mohawk teaching, by way of our timely and important symposium here, linking arms together. Special thanks to our elder Gary and Tina for the wonderful ceremony this morning, and also to the Toronto Council Fire Drum and the singers, the keepers of our sacred songs, especially the two young boys. You see, at school, none of this was allowed in many, many schools. So it's important that we go back and offer that opportunity for our culture, our spirituality, to open us in a good way, as Tina and Gary and also the drummers have done. And thank you, Mississaugas of New Credit also, and I join Peter's words in acknowledging their welcome into their traditional territory. As we approach our fifth and final year of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, I want to share with you some highlights. First, I'd like to remind you of the scope of the Commission's mandate. Recently, we had an opportunity to update the Senate and also the United Nations Permanent Forum in New York. We reminded us that the mandate comes to us through the Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement. It was signed in 2007 by several parties, including the Government of Canada, the Protestant churches, the Catholic Church, and many, many representatives of student survivors. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission is authorized and required to do a number of things. To inform all Canadians about the history and ongoing legacy of the residential schools. To give an opportunity to all former students, staff, and all those affected by the schools to participate in the telling of that history through national and community events and statement gathering. To hold 7 national public education and commemorative events, as well as regional and community events. To collect every record that's relevant to the history and impact of the schools. To conduct original research that builds upon the previous research that was done, and to prepare reports based on that work. And this is largely due to Professor Malloy, and I want to thank you for laying the groundwork on that research for us. To establish a national research center that'll make accessible to all Canadians all of the statements, research, and other materials that have been collected by the Commission. And last, but most importantly, to guide and inspire a process of healing and reconciliation within Aboriginal families and communities, and between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people in this country. So you see, it's a vast mandate. The second point I want to make by way of context is that our mandate is not optional. It's a court-ordered mandate, a legal obligation involving not only the Commission, but the parties to the settlement agreement as well. The agreement itself settled the largest class action lawsuit in Canadian history. The survivors agreed to set aside $60 million of their compensation fund for the Commission's purpose, and to ask the Commission to complete its work within 5 years. The Commission's mandate ends on July 1st, 2014, just over a year from now. So that's our mandate. As an update, let me tell you now some of what the Commission has done so far to discharge its obligations. The responsibilities of the Truth Commission are intertwined and overlapping. By that I mean, when we carry out one aspect of our mandate, we inevitably make progress on one or two others at the same time. For instance, our mandate to inform Canadians about the impact of the residential schools is carried out in large part by holding events at which we provide an opportunity for survivors of these schools to speak publicly about their experiences. Bearing witness to the truths expressed by survivors creates possibilities for reconciliation. And that's what you are doing here today, bearing witness. And I want to thank each and every one of you for that. It doesn't guarantee reconciliation, but we have seen that reconciliation doesn't stand a chance if it is not firmly rooted in a profound appreciation of the truths of others. At the time the Indian Residential School Agreement was signed, there were approximately 80,000 former students of the residential schools listed in the agreement who were still alive in Canada. Many were quite elderly. In the intervening years, that number has dropped to perhaps 10,000. By perhaps 10,000. Since its inception, the Commission has been committed to providing every one of them and every other person whose life has been affected by the residential school system with the opportunity to create a record of their experience. To date, we've collected about 5,200 statements, public and private. Most were provided by survivors at the schools themselves. But increasingly, we've been hearing from the children of the survivors and their children, the ones whose lives represent the legacy of the schools. At an average length of about 45 minutes to an hour, it would take about 2.5 years for one person working full-time to view or listen to the statements we've gathered so far. Some say it's too hard for me to share my story in public, but I'll write a poem, I'll write a book, or I'll do a play, or I'll sing a song, make a blanket, do an audio tape or videotape. There we will see how it has impacted me. So you see, when we started our work, we said this was a sacred trust for the child taken and for the parent left behind. And also, very importantly, for the child who came after. Oh, I'm told if I do this, it should work. Actually, let me just go back to this one. This is a real stark reminder for many of us who went to residential schools. You see, we ask ourselves, what happens to the child when they're taken from their parents? We've heard many stories from former students, survivors, who remembered these dorms as a place of tremendous loneliness, homesickness, some of constant fear. Was this the night that someone was going to come down that hall and attack me? I want to show you a picture here, because this picture tells the whole story in a way of my life. This was my school. And you'll see, I wish I had a little pointer here, but on the right-hand side, you'll just see a little bit of a black spot. That was our garden. That's where we had to work. Some people say it was child labor. But also you'll see in the back two buildings, one is a hog barn, the other one is a cow barn. That's where we had to milk the cows. There you'll see the school with the residents and the classrooms and the church. You'll see some swings, teeter-totter. It was quite interesting. We used to make these games at the school. And one of the games we made was about rodeo all the time. We had a game on those swings where you would have someone throw one of the seats coming in an opposite direction while you're swinging. Then he'd reach over and grab it, tie a string on it, and he had to jump off at the height of the swing. And you were timed. And that was supposed to be to simulate one of the rodeo events. Other times, the big boys would wear a belt on their chest, and you had, as a little boy, go on top and the back, and they would pretend they were a horse, and they'd buck you off. And when you're little, if you fall off that high to the ground, teeter-totter, that was also a horse. We learned to play that. Baseball. We played baseball. We had a game. Actually, one guy used to hit the ball and he'd get thrown out at first base. He'd just keep running to second base, make a real nice slide into second base, get thrown out, dust himself off, and keep running to third base, and all the way home. He'd get thrown out at every base, but he'd still go because he thought he had to make a home run on every swing. So this was my home for many years. What you will see in a different shot of this same school is there's a fence in front. There's a fence in front there. That barbed wire fence was an electric fence. And that's what kept us inside the school grounds. But even there, we made a game. You know, in ice hockey, or at least on hockey rinks, skating rinks, we used to call a game Crack the Whip. I don't know if you've ever played it, but anyway, you hold hands and you skate really hard, and the anchor person stops, and everyone else goes really, really fast. And the last one, of course, goes the fastest, and sometimes things could happen. But anyway, somebody thought of a game. If you took a blade of grass, picked up a blade of grass, and a bunch of us joined hands, and the guy with the blade of grass touches that electric fence, everybody got a shock. But the last person, you didn't want to be the last person, because you would get the worst of that. So we made games out of the life in school. And this was the last school I went to. This was described as the largest Indian residential school in Canada, this Ermineskin School. I just wanted to share with you a bit of my history. We've held 5 national events. Each of these events have been based on a theme, one of the sacred teachings. For example, in Winnipeg, it was about respect. In Inuvik, it was about courage. Halifax, what I thought would be a very difficult one, and I'm very happy I was proven so wrong, because the theme for Halifax was love. You see, love was something you did not have in residential school. So to have a theme of a national event based on that, I thought would be difficult. But as I say, I was wrong. Saskatoon was about the truth. They wanted to talk about treaties as being about truth and honesty. Montreal, our most recent event, was about humility. There's someone here I want to acknowledge. I hope she doesn't mind. We've had 7 events, 5 national events, and 2 regional events in Victoria and Whitehorse. There's a person here that has been to 5 of them. Where are you seated? Where are you? So there she is. Thank you very much for your support. We want to acknowledge you. Stand up. She's been to 5 of these events. Thank you very much. Many of the hearings, the 68 community hearings, were across the north. We had a regional event in Victoria and Whitehorse. 2 national events remain, one in British Columbia, in Vancouver, from September 18th to the 21st of this fall, and the Alberta National Event, which will be in Edmonton next spring, from March 27th to the 30th. Leading up to those events, we expect to conduct another 7 community hearings in both BC and Alberta. In fact, we had one this week in British Columbia. And we have plans for a closing event in Ottawa. By the time we have shut our doors, we anticipate that we will have gathered more than 6,000 statements. I don't want to get caught up endlessly in numbers, but I do want to make sure I have given you a proper sense of the scope and nature of the Commission's efforts to date. If you had attended the TRC's most recent national event in Montreal, the Quebec National Event, your visit would have been with one of about 12,000 people over the 4 days. You could have taken in more than 50 ceremonies, truth sharing, educational activities, reconciliation activities, cultural performances. And I want to thank Ellen Gabriel. She organized a very, very important set of information educational events on, for example, the two-row wampum as reconciliation, the Peace of Montreal, the Royal Proclamation, which is commemorating its 250th anniversary this year. So thank you, Ellen, for your tremendous contribution to that event in Montreal. You could have sat at the back of a packed hall of over 500 grade 6 to grade 12 students from across Canada, Quebec in particular. You would have watched as they paid rapt attention to presentations and performances and the opinions of their peers. I remember students like you calling for, actually demanding, that the history of residential schools should be taught in all schools. There were stories from university students, law faculties, who organized on their own initiative programs in their university campuses. You could have taken in a variety of films, from the acclaimed We Were Children by the National Film Board and Eagle Vision, to a dozen short documentaries created by young people through the Wapikani Mobile Project. You could have witnessed the courageous public statements of dozens of survivors of the schools, some of them speaking publicly for the very first time about their experience. There was a display called The Red Memory, a very powerful display about residential school history. You could have watched the induction of 8 new Truth and Reconciliation honorary witnesses, including the former Prime Minister, Right Honorable Paul Martin, and a former National Hockey League star, Joey Juneau. Former Prime Minister, Right Honorable Joe Clark, joined the ranks of our honorary witnesses last year in Saskatoon. Our very first honorary witness was the former Governor General, Her Excellency Michael Jean. Grand Chief Ed John, who's here with us today, is also one of our honorary witnesses. Not only that, but a survivor himself. You could have witnessed 24 expressions of reconciliation from individuals, organizations, governments, and churches. You could have taken part in a very moving birthday party to the hundreds of survivors who were present. You see, birthdays were not acknowledged in most of the residential schools. But what's also important is that the 1,200 cupcakes with little candles and homemade birthday cards, were the courtesy of children and youth of church congregations throughout the Montreal and Ottawa corridor. More than 45 journalists registered to cover the Quebec National event. Live webcasting of the event attracted more than 6,700 streams to over 30 countries. We've been aware from the outset of our work of the international importance, the international impact the Commission could have and has been having. For example, thanks to Chief Ed John, as chairperson of the UN Permanent Forum in New York, he made sure that the residential history was discussed and known about by the United Nations. When the Commission first began its work, the population of Quebec was relatively ill-informed about Canada's history. We believe now that we've made a turn from that. I could share with you similar details from other national events, but that will suffice to give you some idea of the work we are doing. So if you've not yet attended a TRC national event, I hope you'll make an effort to do so. The Commission has collected over 2.6 million documents from the Government of Canada and the churches. This is a large number, but as you know, it does not include any of the millions of documents relevant to the residential schools, which are housed by the Library and Archives Canada. You'll be familiar with the Auditor General's comments regarding the inability of Canada and the Commission to reach agreement on the scope of the documents to be produced by Canada to the Commission. I'd like to acknowledge up front that the Government of Canada and the Commission were not able to come to an agreement over the documents housed by Library and Archives Canada. This was a fundamental disagreement that went on too long. It was resolved in January of this year by the Ontario Superior Court of Justice, which upheld the Commission's interpretation of the Indian Residential School Agreement. Now that the issue has been clarified, I can say that progress is well underway in terms of getting the documents. Many have flown to us since that court decision. What we're concerned about is the timing over the next 12 months of getting the rest of those documents, and whether or not we will indeed be able to meet our mandate with respect, with telling the whole story. Despite the delays in document production, we've undertaken a great deal of relevant research. Some of this was represented in our interim report, in our preliminary history of the schools entitled, "They Came for the Children." Both were released in February of 2012. It'll also be represented in our 4-volume final report, which will address the work of the Commission and its findings, the history of the residential schools, their legacy, and the requirements and prospects for meaningful reconciliation. I want to add at this point that the Prime Minister's apology stated, and I quote, "In a very real sense, we are now joining you on this journey." I want to thank Minister Valcourt. He has, since his appointment, met with the commissioners 3 times. He met with the all parties, the first minister to do so a couple of weeks ago. Thank you to the minister for trying to live out that part of the apology, where he did try to join our journey. I want to mention one particular research project which has been ongoing for much of the Commission's existence. This is not really a part of our mandate, but it's called the Missing Children Project. You may know that about 150,000 Aboriginal children attended Canada's residential schools over a period of roughly 150 years. You may not know that thousands of them died at these schools. The Commission has thus far identified and discovered details concerning 4,134 children who went missing or died at these schools. We heard about runaways, students who ran away from the abuse only to drown trying to cross the river to go home, only to drown as they fell through the ice in the wintertime. Yes, some died by accident, some by diseases. But we've heard stories about children burying children in these schools. I remember one grandmother telling us about a little teddy bear. She said she sat with a little girl, a tiny girl, the smallest girl in the school, as she held, clutching her little teddy bear. And she was holding her, and she died in her arms. She was 9 years old at the time, and she said to us, "I've been carrying this story since then." We heard about students dying from beatings, but at least now we have a number that continues to grow as the research is not yet finished. It's of course of great interest to the families involved. More importantly, however, it allows us to discuss the impact of the schools on the daily lives of Aboriginal families in a manner that has deep emotional meaning for everyone. I remember a picture that Chief Ed John showed me in New York of 4 little boys that were found clutching each other as they had frozen to death, running away from school. Now let me bring you up to date on the progress of the National Research Center. The settlement agreement calls on a Truth Commission to establish a National Research Center within its 5 years of operation. Over the past 2.5 years, the Commission has taken a number of steps towards the center's establishment, including a forum of international experts in Vancouver, and a well-publicized call for expressions of interest. We received over 4 expressions of interest from prospective host organizations, each with numerous partners, and have completed negotiations with the organization that best met our selection criteria. I refer to the University of Manitoba and its 8 proposed founding partners, which was announced last week in Winnipeg. This is a trust transfer with a significant milestone for us as the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Finally, in the area of reconciliation, the Commission has continually emphasized the importance of reconciliation being about establishing and maintaining a relationship of mutual respect. I've already referred to the dialogues we've had at communities, regional and national events with survivors and others in attendance. Those have generated significant discussion and interesting perspectives. The commissioners have also engaged in such discussions with the parties to the settlement agreement at all parties' meetings, where we've been holding such discussions with them. We've spoken at numerous public and private conferences and gatherings with the communities, provincial and national leaders, on the question of reconciliation. Yesterday we had one here in Toronto, yesterday morning, and I know there's a young man here that was there as well yesterday. Where are you? Thank you very much for being there yesterday, a very important discussion. It was with the Sustainability Network. It was interesting because they asked me a question to talk about, and they said, what is the role of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in the relevance of the environment for reconciliation? We had a group meet in Montreal right after that yesterday afternoon, also discussing a way forward for reconciliation. One of the most significant ones was the annual gathering of the Council of Ministers of Education last July, where we emphasized the need to look seriously at curriculum changes in the field of public education that teach children appropriately about the history of the relationship between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people in Canada, in order to lay the foundation of mutual respect in the future. We asked the ministers to make a commitment to make those changes, and followed that up with personal letters asking for updates following our meeting. Many have responded positively, and we look forward to meeting with them again this summer. Lieutenant Governor David Onley of Ontario, Lieutenant Governor Philip Lee of Manitoba, Lieutenant Governor Graydon Nicholas of New Brunswick, and former Lieutenant Governor Stephen Point of BC have all hosted TRC events, including dialogues on reconciliation with members of the public at their respective government houses. Our emphasis on reconciliation will continue to the end of our mandate. It'll be symposia like today that will really gain importance on this path to reconciliation. It's going to take all of us working together. We've used our sacred teachings to guide us, and it's by linking arms together that we will get there. And I look forward to that effort with you. Thank you very much for this opportunity to give you an update. Thank you.